You know what's funny? Every time people hear the phrase 10 illegal tricks to make your car run better, they think I'm telling them to do something actually illegal. But the truth is, these tricks are only illegal in a dealership-style sense. They go against what dealerships want you to believe, want you to do, and sometimes want you to pay for. And here's the fun part. They're not expensive mods, not complicated engine tunes. They're all cheap, simple tricks that can make your car run smoother, stronger, and save you thousands of dollars. Let's get started. According to data from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, only 19% of drivers actually check and maintain proper tire pressure. The number printed on your door pillar isn't meant to optimize performance or fuel economy. It's there to guarantee a smooth-as-butter ride for the showroom experience. If you think the PSI printed on the door is the perfect number, sorry, but that's one of the most subtle marketing moves in the U.S. auto industry. The manufacturer sets that number for one reason: to make the car ride as quiet, soft, and smooth as possible during a test drive. Let's call it what it is: showroom. PSI is marketing tuning, not performance tuning. The problem starts with low pressure. When the tire is soft, the contact patch increases, rolling resistance goes up. And the consequences are things every American driver hates. The engine works harder, MPG drops, steering response slows, and the car feels heavy and sluggish. Technical data shows that just a 1 psi drop can increase rolling resistance by 0.30–0.6%. A few psi lower than optimal, your car is basically dragging an invisible trailer. So what's the illegal solution dealerships don't want you to know? Increase 3 to 5 psi above the number on the door sticker, depending on real-world conditions. How many people you usually carry, whether you haul cargo, how often you drive on the highway, and your daily road conditions. This goes against the showroom comfort standard, but is still completely safe as long as you don't exceed the max PSI printed on the tire sidewall. You can feel the difference the first time you try it. A firmer tire makes the car more stable, cornering more confident, steering more precise. Rolling resistance drops, the engine breathes easier, and you can save 2 to 3 mpg on average, sometimes even more on hybrids or compact cars. Tires wear more evenly, heat dissipates better, lifespan increases, and blowout risk decreases. Cleaning the throttle body is basically just a cheap trick, around $8, but dealerships in the US turn it into a premium $340 service. They like to call it something serious sounding, like a major service, while in reality it's just wiping off carbon that's blocking the engine's airflow. This issue is so common that almost any car in the US with more than 50,000–60,000 miles will experience it. Rough idle, hard starting, slow throttle response, sluggish acceleration, and the feeling that the engine is out of breath. Carbon buildup mainly comes from oil vapor in the PCV system, from EGR gases, and from simple wear over time. When it builds up thick enough on the butterfly valve inside the throttle body, it restricts the air going into the engine. The ECU doesn't receive the correct amount of airflow, so it reacts incorrectly. Unstable idle, throttle lag, power loss, and slower than usual acceleration. This isn't a serious failure, it's just the engine trying to breathe through a dirty tube. The real solution is much simpler. A can of throttle body cleaner for about $8 at AutoZone or O'Reilly, and around 15 minutes of doing it yourself. Just remove the intake tube, spray the cleaner into the TB, gently scrub with a soft brush, wipe it clean, and reinstall everything. This is probably why DIY culture in the US is so strong. People like things that are simple, cheap, and effective, especially when it helps them avoid listening to another upsell speech from a service advisor. The results happen fast. Airflow is restored immediately. Idle becomes more stable. Throttle becomes sharper. Acceleration feels smoother, and it reduces the chance of stalling at stoplights. Independent tests show that carbon buildup can reduce airflow by up to 23%, meaning just cleaning it can recover a portion of your engine's original performance. Slow throttle response, you press the gas, and the car reacts like it's pulling a boat. MPG drops horribly even though you haven't changed your driving habits. Idle is sometimes smooth, sometimes shaky, And occasionally, the check engine light comes on with a lean or rich code. The majority of American drivers will immediately think of spark plugs, fuel pumps, air filters, or worst of all, injectors. But the real culprit is often much simpler: a dusty mass airflow sensor. A MAF sensor only needs a bit of oil, some ultrafine dust, or a thin layer of carbon to start misreading the airflow entering the engine. The ECU relies on that number to calculate how much fuel to inject, so when the MAF reads incorrectly, the ECU gets it wrong as well. The result? Fuel trims go off, the engine runs rich or lean, the car loses power, and MPG falls off a cliff. And all of this happens because of a sensor that costs $7 to clean. But that's exactly why dealerships never talk about cleaning the MAF. They prefer to suggest the safer option: replace the entire sensor. The price? Anywhere from $180 to $250 before tax. For them, it's an easy win. You see the check engine light? They tell you the sensor is bad. You get worried, they smile. A perfect transaction. Why? Because most Americans are busy, don't want to argue about technical details, and don't have time to sit in the dealer's parking lot Googling the issue. Meanwhile, the reality is that 90% of cases come from dirt, and to fix it, all you need is a can of MAF-specific cleaner, around $7. Don't use brake cleaner, don't use carb cleaner, but you still need to pay attention and pick the right type for your car. Then unplug the electrical socket, pull the sensor out, spray directly onto the sensing element, let it air dry for 10 minutes, and reinstall it. And that's it. The ECU receives correct data again, idle stabilizes, the car runs smoother, and throttle becomes more responsive. MPG improves noticeably, especially for delivery vehicles or commuters. A Ford Transit that was struggling at 11 mpg can jump to over 15 mpg after a MAF cleaning. Over a year of 30,000 miles, that's hundreds to even thousands of dollars saved, all from a $7 spray can. In the U.S., more than 70% of car purchases are used cars. That means most of us are driving a vehicle that carries someone else's memories, and the car's electronics, especially the ECU, hold on to those memories very tightly. It remembers how the previous owner pressed the gas pedal in a push-hard, go-slow style. It remembers the incorrect fuel trims caused by whatever cheap gas that person kept filling. It remembers unstable idle patterns, sluggish acceleration, and even the times the old owner drove like they were towing a gigantic camper, even when they weren't carrying anything. When you step in, the ECU is still living in 2019 with that guy, completely ignoring the fact that you exist. And then you start feeling like something is off. Throttle feels delayed. The car accelerates like it needs someone's permission before passing another vehicle. Idle goes up and down for no reason, but refuses to trigger a check engine light. Sometimes the MPG is high, and sometimes it's so low you'd think you're towing an invisible trailer. Most people assume the engine is weak, the fuel system is dirty, or the transmission is failing. But no, your car is just trying to recreate the boring driving style of someone you've never even met, when in many cases, the entire issue could be fixed by simply resetting the ECU. Resetting the ECU basically erases everything the ECU has learned. It's like pressing the delete history button on someone else's web browser. And trust me, your car has some history worth deleting. All you need to do is disconnect the negative battery terminal, press the gas pedal for a few seconds to drain the stored electricity, wait a little, then reconnect it. Or, if you prefer a more precise method, just pull the fuse that powers the PCM, ECM, and plug it back in after a few minutes. Now the car forgets the old owner and is ready to learn from scratch. Right after the reset, the car enters a stage similar to a first date with you, watching, learning, and trying to understand your driving style. It relearns throttle behavior, how you accelerate, and what type of fuel you use, whether it's clean 91 premium or cheap 87 regular, and begins adjusting the fuel trims accordingly. Usually, within 20 to 50 miles, the car becomes fully synced with the way you drive. Most Americans live in the suburbs. That means your daily routine probably looks like this. Drive 5 to 10 minutes to work, swing by a drive-thru, run to Walmart, then go home. All short trips, too short for the engine to fully warm up. And when the engine never reaches operating temperature, fuel doesn't burn completely. Many people think, my car still runs fine, but inside, carbon is quietly sticking to valves, pistons, turbo, catalytic converter, like cooled grease on a frying pan. A little more every day. And then one morning you realize the car feels weak, throttle is slow, idle is slightly rough. The funny thing? The group affected the most is the group that doesn't realize they have a problem. Family SUV owners, hybrid drivers, remote workers who barely drive outside their neighborhoods. This group makes up the majority of American drivers. They don't abuse their cars. They don't drive aggressively. They just drive too gently for the engine to ever get hot enough. The principle is simple. Bring the engine to high temperature long enough to burn off carbon. No tools, no complicated techniques, no paying a dealer hundreds of dollars. All you need to do is take the car onto the highway and hold the engine at around 3,500 to 4,000 RPM for 10-15 minutes. Not flooring it and slowing down, just holding it steady. Once the exhaust and catalytic converter reach high enough temperatures, the built-up carbon gets burned off and blown out. When you return to city driving, the car suddenly feels lighter, throttle more responsive, idle smoother, and MPG often improves. The exhaust even sounds a bit more open because the airflow is cleaner again. And the reason it's called illegal is simply because it goes against what automakers keep repeating in the manuals: drive gently. They don't like you doing this because when carbon buildup decreases, you won't need their services as often. And when people can solve carbon problems themselves, dealerships lose revenue from additives, cleaning services, and major tune-ups. So the illegal part isn't about breaking the law, it's about breaking the dealership's profit cycle. There's a myth people keep repeating that 91% of spark plugs are not actually pre-gapped correctly. 91%. Whether that number is truly accurate or not, the fact is that spark plugs from the factory are usually not gapped for optimal performance. They're set to meet one goal only: emissions tests. That's why many sources say some brand new spark plugs come with a gap either too wide or too narrow compared to what your engine actually needs to run strong, smooth, and at its real potential. So what happens when you install a pre-gapped plug that's actually out of spec? Your car may start showing symptoms like delayed throttle response, sluggish acceleration, slightly rough idle, and an overall feeling that the engine is older or weaker than it should be. And when you take the car to a dealer, they might suggest new plugs and a new coil pack for $400. And of course, no one mentions that the real issue might just be a $4 gap. Real mechanics, the ones who've been fixing cars for decades and aren't trying to upsell you a coil pack, always follow a golden rule. When installing new spark plugs, measure the gap yourself and make it slightly smaller than the manufacturer's spec by about 0.01–0.002 inch. The factory doesn't optimize for performance, they optimize for emissions. A tighter gap creates a stronger, more consistent spark, helping the fuel burn cleaner and harder, especially at high RPM or when you accelerate aggressively. The result is a more responsive engine, better acceleration, smoother idle, and no need for any ECU tuning or complicated mods. The engineers at the manufacturer make the air filter denser than necessary, restricting airflow, just to make sure the car doesn't produce even the slightest wind noise when accelerating in the showroom. And that's why 77% of factory air filters out there share the same problem. They choke the airflow before it even reaches the engine. The result? Your car, even when brand new, still accelerates slowly, has sluggish throttle response, and the feeling of power is almost non-existent. If you've ever driven a hybrid or a city car and felt that it was gutless, where you hit the gas and the car responds like it's thinking about whether it should move or not, then congratulations! You've tasted the consequences of a factory air filter. A new filter, K&N, AEM, or equivalent, is as simple as opening the intake box, dropping it in, and closing the lid. Done. High-flow filters use oiled cotton or synthetic media that increase airflow by 30–50% compared to stock filters, and installing them is as easy as replacing a normal filter. As long as you clean it regularly as recommended, around every 15,000 to 50,000 miles depending on the car, the performance stays very consistent. And because high-flow filters are reusable, you won't be wasting money replacing filters over and over like before. You'll feel the benefits almost immediately after the first test. Increased airflow, noticeably better throttle response, and on many hybrids or city cars, the 0-160 time even drops by 0.5 to 0.7 seconds, just from a $60 filter. When the engine can breathe better, fuel is burned more efficiently, the engine stays cleaner, and it won't feel suffocated during hard acceleration or climbing hills. Nothing in your car is lifetime, especially not transmission fluid. Manufacturers love throwing around the phrase lifetime fluid as if they're giving you some premium privilege. It sounds classy, convenient, like you'll never have to think about it again. But, in reality, lifetime has nothing to do with the lifetime of the car you're driving. It only refers to the lifetime of the warranty, the thing they want to keep as short and cheap as possible. The truth they avoid is that transmission fluid begins to degrade clearly from 40,000 to 60,000 miles. When you're driving on the highway in 100-degree Texas heat, when you're towing, when you're stuck in LA traffic, all of that breaks down the fluid, contaminates it with metal, and reduces its protective ability. At some point, it's no longer protective fluid, but more like a soup full of debris that you unknowingly stir every day. It's no surprise that most transmission failures come from cars that followed the manufacturer's lifetime fluid recommendation. And what happens when the fluid degrades? The car starts to shudder when accelerating, the transmission slips gears, sometimes jerking so hard you think someone hit your rear bumper. Strange noises appear when shifting, and if you ignore them, a $3,000, $7,000 transmission repair bill will soon find its way to you. For American drivers, nothing hurts more than a dying transmission. AC failure, alternator burnout, weak battery. Those are manageable. But the transmission? That's a level of financial pain everyone tries to avoid. Want to know the mechanic's secret? It's the drain and fill method. No aggressive flushing, because flushing can spread debris everywhere and cause early damage. Instead, they gradually replace 40% of the fluid every 40,000, 50,000 miles. Done correctly, the fluid stays clean, viscosity stays stable, and the transmission gets the protection it needs. With this method, the transmission can live from 180,000 to 220,000 miles instead of dying at 90,000. 3 drain and fills cost a little over $400, not even as much as a tow truck when your transmission dies on the road. The car shifts smoother, drives quieter, and most importantly, you avoid the most expensive repair bill in all of car ownership. According to the EPA, 87% of American drivers fall under severe service conditions, meaning the kind of driving that destroys oil much faster than theory suggests. Short trips make the engine shut off before the oil even gets hot. Traffic makes temperatures fluctuate constantly, and the weather is far more extreme than car manufacturers like to admit. All these small things stack up, turning ideal conditions into a fairy tale. The result? Tons of people believe in the factory oil change intervals, and in return, they get the harsh truth. Oil breaking down early, sludge beginning to form, and the engine wearing out much faster than the pretty numbers in the brochure. And then what happens? One random morning, you start the engine and hear it ticking so loud you think it's a clock inside the cabin. But no, it's the oil no longer lubricating properly. Sludge has built up at the bottom of the oil pan, around the pistons, and between the valves. Suddenly, your $60 oil change turns into a $3,000 repair bill. Mechanics have always had an unwritten rule: 5,000 miles for conventional oil and $6,000 and 7,000 miles for full synthetic. Simple, clear, and effective. No one believes the 10,000-mile interval except people who aren't the ones repairing the engines afterward. And of course, no mechanic recommends using the cheapest oil filter, because that's the fastest way to turn clean oil into dirty oil. If you learn only one trick, learn this one: the PCV valve. The PCV valve, positive crankcase ventilation, sounds technical, but its nature is extremely simple. It releases excess pressure in the crankcase and routes blow-by gases back into the combustion chamber to burn cleanly. When it works properly, the engine stays cleaner. Carbon buildup is reduced, and your oil isn't forced out through gaskets and seals. When the PCV valve fails or gets clogged, everything starts going downhill without you even realizing it. Oil begins to leak slightly, then heavily. Carbon builds up thick on the valves, pistons, and combustion chamber. Power drops slowly, the car gets sluggish, and fuel consumption increases. But the scariest part? There's no warning, no check engine light, no strange noises, no clear symptoms. Everything happens silently until one day you get a repair quote that makes you want to faint just by looking at it. We usually recommend our viewers replace the PCV valve every 30k 50k miles. This is one of the easiest, fastest, and most effective maintenance steps a car owner can do. And if you want to be more thorough, check the PCV hose, the crankcase ventilation passages, and make sure everything flows freely. Just a few small steps, but they help the engine breathe much cleaner and smoother. Thanks to this, carbon buildup drops significantly, and the engine runs clean for hundreds of thousands of miles. Oil doesn't leak for no reason. Power stays consistent, the car feels smooth, and throttle response stays sharp. You avoid a whole list of major repair costs that could have been prevented from the start. This is exactly why that truck was able to reach 412,000 miles. In the end, all these illegal tricks sound dangerous, but they're only illegal in the sense that they go against the unwritten rules dealerships have been pushing for decades. You don't need a new turbo, you don't need an ECU tune, and you don't need to dump a ton of money into the performance mods that YouTubers try to sell you. What you actually need? Just proper maintenance. The kind of maintenance many dealerships might not want you to do because it makes your car last too long. Have you ever heard of or tried any of these tricks? Or have you discovered another maintenance secret that most people still overlook? Share it below. Notice that this video is based on publicly available information, vehicle manuals, and automotive studies. It's for educational purposes only and doesn't promote any specific brand. Always cross-check details, follow your manufacturer's guidelines, and make your own maintenance decisions. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.